Again, our next bill that is in front of us is City Council Bill 200608, Ordinance Indigenous Peoples Day. I am the sponsor of said bill, and you can also hear my little boys who are in the background also adding to the cacophony of sound here in council chambers, but we will work around that as well. Again, just want to recognize the members of the committee who are with us today. So again, we also have council members Burnett, Henry, Sneed, Cohen, Dorsey, and I believe that we also have Schleifer as well. Good to see you on camera, Councilman Henry, looking sharp there. So without further ado, we will get going. So we introduced this bill recently, and again, the whole purpose is to identify and to honor Indigenous Peoples Day. We know the history of this continent. We know also the way that we have been celebrating history oftentimes has left a lot to be desired. That being said, we want to give proper recognition, but also want to provide an opportunity for members of the community to speak. We know there are members of the Native American community who would like to speak, and we also know that there are members of other communities, including Italian Americans, who may also have some comments. I think one of the unfortunate challenges over time has been that Columbus Day has been conflated along with Italian heritage, and they're not exactly the same thing. And we've heard from a number of folks who would also like to have that separation. But for the purposes of today, we are going to focus on commemorating the holiday for Indigenous Peoples Day. And again, I thank you also, Richard, members of the staff, to the committee. And that also we have to have all the reports again, for folks before they go to the BOE as far as our housing bills as well. So thank you for that too. Yeah. And so with that being said, we will go forward. Look, I want to take a look at some of the agency reports. Again, essentially we've had no position as it relates to us, but I do see Vic Turvilla from Law. Did you want to add anything, or are we good?
We're good. We're ready to approve the bill for form and legal sufficiency.
Awesome. Thank you very much. I did also, since I mentioned members of the committee, are there any members of the committee who have any comments before we get us going with any other testimony?
I'm good, Mr. Chair. I don't know, I can speak for others, but just looking forward to the testimony.
All right. Thank you very much. Any other members of the committee have anything to say? If not, we will we'll move right ahead into testimony. Or give me 1 second. Okay, so we do have a few folks who do want to testify, so we are going to try to go to them now. So just bear with us as we make this transition.
Okay, Mr. Chair.
Looks like I'm sorry, Dominic. Before you go, it looks like Councilman Dorsey, do you have something you want to add?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to say that. I highly anticipate that we're going to hear some folks who speak very broadly about the Italian community. And I just want to upfront here identify myself as, as a descendant of Italian immigrants, and consider myself an Italian American, and that we will not hear any testimony today from anybody who speaks on behalf of—
You're muted, Councilman.
I don't
Councilman
think
Dorsey, you're muted.
I don't think I'm muted.
I can hear Councilman Dorsey.
I'll just finish what I'm saying. I don't think that it's not possible. I'll put it that way. It's not possible that we will hear from anybody here today who can speak on behalf of the Italian or the Italian American community as any sort of monolith. It involves a lot of variety of folks, as in any collective identification. So we'll just leave it at that for now. And maybe I'll give my wrap on the history of Columbus Day at a certain point if it seems necessary. Thanks.
All right, again, so thank you everyone. As you know, sometimes we're going through some technical difficulties, but thankfully we're able to work through them. Let's also go through some of the testimony or people who are here to testify as well. I know Councilman Dorsey had some comments, but any additional comments from members of the committee? And if not, we will go into the testimony.
Hmm? Okay.
Yes.
Testimony.
Yes, so we're going to go into public testimony at this point.
Okay. Bonnie, raise your hand.
Yes, good afternoon. We can hear you. Go right ahead. Bonnie Raven Lane.
Scheduled, but I would like to say something. I am Cherokee, Chippewa, and Seminole ancestry, and I highly encourage you to support and pass this bill. Thank you.
Well, thank you for your concise and supportive testimony. Very much appreciated. We'll go to the next group to testify.
Randy Ward, you're on.
Good afternoon. My indigenous name is Shadalay Phoenix. I'm with the group Indigenous Strong, and I highly recommend that I'm in support of this bill. I'm a descendant of the Cherokee Nation, Choctaw Nation, Blackfeet, Crow, and Creek, and I think this would do honor to our community. Thank you.
Yeah, well, your testimony. We do know that there are members of Indigenous Strong who are here to testify today, so we thank you, for your advocacy, and then also the different nations and peoples who are represented. So again, thank you for lifting it up. We'll go to the next group to testify.
Brittany Harrison. Brittany Harrison, you're on.
Hi, I was just here observing. I didn't want to testify. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Dan. Dan, you're on. Dan.
Sorry, I forgot to lower my hand. You could, I don't want to touch.
All right.
Thanks. Okay. Donato Fabioli.
No, to the con.
Fabioli Donato.
No comment.
Just bear with us as we're going through the list.
Jennifer Foyleon.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, please go ahead.
Okay. Hello, my name is Jennifer Falayan. I am Cherokee, Pueblo, and Aztec. There is a Cherokee saying, when you were born, you cried and the world rejoiced. Live your life so that when you die, the world cries and you rejoice. I just wanted to honor all of us here today and those that have brought us here. It has been a very eye-opening year for truth, light, and justice to come to the surface. And I honor the long hours and passion that each of you on the City Council have been bringing to heal Baltimore City. I know it's been a tough road, so I honor all that work and dedication. It's said that children often gain confidence when they see reflected images of themselves and family in the home. And Baltimore is home to many urban Indians like myself. And when children see where they fit in and learn the genealogy and the uniqueness of their own family and its story, they gain a lot of confidence. And they may look at the photograph and say, these people have a part of what I am, and I belong here, and this is where I come from. And moving to have Indigenous Peoples Day, that is to see ourselves reflected in Baltimore City. And many of you on the panel may have even been shocked to learn that there's Indians in Baltimore. You're like, what? They're still here? And yes, we are still here. And it's a story of resilience. And like many of you on the panel who have many genealogy and ancestors from many different parts, our stories are one of resistance and resilience. And our existence is just testimony to that resilience of all of our peoples. We ask for Indigenous Peoples Day because there has been erasure, there has been traumatic events, and the legacies that have continued from Columbus and others who have perpetuated rape and colonization. We ask that we be celebrated. Would it be an impossible request to have a day that celebrates and honor our people? Would it be an unimaginable idea to accept that we are still here and we will continue to contribute to our communities and to history? As I said, I thank each of you for the work that you've put in, and I see that this year, we all know now is the time to honor those leaders that have passed this year, to honor that legacy of truth and justice, and have Indigenous Peoples Day passed in Baltimore City like it's been done in over 100 cities around the country. So thank you so much.
Thank you again, for your testimony. One thing I'll say again, you make reference to urban Indians. We think about the native population within our cities and Baltimore City specifically. So I'm glad that you lifted that up. The other point that I would say, and again, just not about boys with you, but the reflection of self for our young people and for folks who've been in struggle. So again, we thank you for giving voice to that. We'll move on to the next testimony.
Jessica Dickerson.
Hi, my name is Jessica Dickerson. Can you all hear me? Awesome. I am an enrolled member of the Lumbee tribe of North Carolina, and I am an urban Indian that has lived in Baltimore my entire life. And I just want to thank you all for allowing this opportunity. And on behalf of myself and the members of Indigenous Strong, we are grateful that this bill and issue is finally getting the attention that it deserves. The celebration of Columbus is an issue that Natives and Indigenous people have been fighting to abolish for decades. This fight does not begin with me, and I want to acknowledge my elders and ancestors that have been fighting this change. That have been fighting this change for a very long time. Columbus is not someone worthy of a day, acknowledged by a city to be celebrated. Columbus is responsible for the loss of lives, traditions, culture, and land, and so much more. Columbus is responsible for the historical trauma that Natives and Indigenous people live with today, all while trying to exceed in a world not built for them to thrive. While this is only a small step in repairing the damage Columbus has caused to Indigenous lives, it is indeed a necessary step. I hope that Baltimore City is ready to be on the correct side of history for this matter. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Hold on for 1 second. So again, you mentioned, the elders and our ancestors, and it's a very important piece. And again, this is not something that just came out of nowhere, but again, there's been a struggle not only here in Baltimore, but other places around the country. So again, thank you for that. We'll move on to the next testimony.
Senator John Pika.
Hello, Councilman. I don't know how you can. This is Councilman Bullock, to the chair. I don't know how you can say that this is completely separate from Italian heritage. I have no problem. I applaud and I'm happy for the Native Americans who are going to have an Indigenous Peoples holiday. I think it's long overdue. I don't think you're going to find any Italian Americans who argue with it. I sent in comments to every council member today. I asked that if you are going to honor Indigenous people, as you should, that the proper day for that is the day after Thanksgiving, just as President Barack Obama did, and just as Governor O'Malley did. I ask that if you are going to eliminate Columbus Day, that you rename it for October 12th for another heroic and iconic Italian who Italian Americans admire. If that's not done, then that's just an insult to Italian Americans. Nobody's here to defend Christopher Columbus today. Nobody's here. I mean, I'm here. I know the reality of this legislation, and I know the reality. I know what's going to happen. But I can just tell you that Italian Americans take great pride in their heritage. And you can rename this day Italian Heritage Day. It can be renamed Amerigo Vespucci Day. But if it's not, you're just shelving Italians aside. That is a day that is no different to Italians than St. Patrick's Day is to the Irish. Martin Luther King Day is to African Americans. Ramadan is a religious holiday. So is Yom Kippur and other Jewish holidays. This is the day that we honor our heritage. I'm hopeful that you rename Columbus Day for with a name that Italians can still celebrate their heritage.
So Mr. Speaker, one of the things that I'll mention. One of the things I would say, this is what I made, the point I made at the outset, was unfortunately over time, somehow Columbus has been conflated with Italian heritage, and they're not the same thing. And so this is the point that we're making. Now, again, as we've talked before, again, that could be a separate issue if someone wants to introduce a bill that speaks to Italian American heritage. I have no problem with that. But again, to right or wrong of history, right? Again, I think there are people who decide to celebrate Columbus Day as if it were Italian American Heritage Day, which it's not. At the same time, as we talk about the struggles that we have in this country, specifically as you mentioned, the MLK holiday, again, which is the converse of someone like Columbus, right? Someone who actually died in the freedom struggle for peoples who have been less than recognized and dehumanized. They're not even in the same league. But again, I think if there's a conversation around Italian American heritage, I think that's another conversation that we should have. But clearly, as far as Indigenous Peoples Day, the purpose is specifically to honor the indigenous peoples of this land who have never been honored. I do want to move to additional testimony. I don't know if there's a member of the committee that wanted to say something, or was that Councilman Henry? Did you have anything to say or no?
I did. My question was not dissimilar to former Senator Tika's, and I'm trying to determine whether you have answered my question in responding to him. In this era of conflicting information available online, it is sometimes difficult to determine how history actually went. And the reason I'm raising this issue is because I have seen historical accounts that would back up Senator Tika's account that the original push to recognize Columbus Day as a governmental holiday was at the behest of Italian Americans, specifically the Knights of Columbus. So we're also dealing with the Catholic Church. And so my question is whether that was true or not, whether the original reason for honoring Christopher Columbus with a day was to honor Italian American heritage or not. It certainly has become that in the time since. And so my question is there a reason we can't do that? I mean, the bill as written simply replaces Columbus Day with Indigenous Peoples Day. And for those people who actually do think of Columbus Day as an opportunity to celebrate Italian American heritage, that group now is simply left out. And so my question is, why not do as suggested? And I think we're all agreed. I have yet to hear anybody at the hearing who still agrees we should be in any way, shape, or form supporting or honoring Christopher Columbus. So we're definitely fine with changing the name of Columbus Day. My question is, why not change it to something like Italian American Heritage Day and then create an Indigenous Peoples Day on a different day in October or November? What's the downside to doing that?
All right, so I'll respond to that. So one, just like we could look at any other day for, as you mentioned, for Indigenous People Day, we can also look at another day for Italian American Heritage Day. Again, we have carved out this day in terms of the connection with Columbus, and unfortunately, there could have been another Italian American that could have been chosen, or not Italian American. There could have been some other Italian figure who could have been chosen, whether it be Enrico Vespucci or anyone else. So, I mean, that's another conversation that I think is worth having. But the other part of it is, again, thinking about why this person was chosen, and the fact that I think there's a big push to decouple this date with Columbus, right? And so we don't want to just be a continuation of and just, another version of what previously was. And so I think that's a lot of thinking as well. I do see that there are some other, suggestions that, that have been made, and I think it's worth having conversations around that. And as you can, see, it's difficult trying to maintain with some of these chats coming in and different comments and all that. But I do appreciate the comments that we have had thus far. I do see that there is another person who's looking to give testimony as well. So I'm just trying to go through all that. And then as I'm doing that, Councilman Dorsey, you had something to say?
Mr. Chairman, can I respond to Councilman Henry's comments?
Mr. Chair.
Let me hear from Councilman Dorsey, and then we'll come to you.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just thought, while we're on the subject of the history of the holiday, it's important to recognize a couple of things. First, the first declaration of Columbus Day as a holiday was a one-time declaration that was largely meant to try to mend some Italian-American diplomatic relations over the lynching of a group of 11 Italian immigrants. It was another 40 years before Congress took action to request that the president annually declare it a holiday. In between, something interesting happened. A rather illegitimately instated governor of the state of Colorado declared it a state holiday. This is a governor whose party lost the election, but through some weird tricks of their General Assembly or their state legislature, instated the losing party after an election on the condition that the gubernatorial candidate immediately resign and allow his running mate, lieutenant gubernatorial candidate, to assume office. It was that rather illegitimately instated governor of Colorado who first declared it a state holiday in Colorado. And interestingly, that guy, both before and after becoming governor of Colorado, owned and operated mines that were largely operated by Italian immigrants who he basically oppressed through signature legislation as a governor to prohibit the breaking of strike to prohibit striking laborers from impeding scabs trying to break their strike line, and spent the rest of his life basically working against labor, including the Italians that worked for him. So there's a really incongruous kind of nature to this. To its origin. I think the other recognition that's really important, as Councilman Henry mentioned, the influence of the Knights of Columbus. Notable among the influencers, particularly in New York, was a guy named Generoso Pope, whose son went on to own and operate the National Enquirer. This is a family who immigrated and then worked through labor and then worked through grocery imports and then eventually sold certain assets and went into the media business. So they were able to acquire newspapers and wield a lot of influence. And in particular, through Tammany Hall politics and through the Italian community in New York, influenced congressional elections in New York City, and wield a lot of influence of votes for FDR to become president. And what's interesting is that Generoso Pope is notable for one other thing, in addition to influencing FDR to declare a holiday. And it's that he influenced FDR to stay uninvolved as Mussolini was invading and committing acts of genocide against Black African people in Ethiopia. That he was in total support of Mussolini, that he was a self-declared enemy of anti-fascism. And yet he had an ear enough of the president of the governing party that at the same time was a European American representative to the Democratic National Committee. And so I think there's just like a really, really mixed up history around this holiday that we really have to acknowledge, that it is not all coming from good actors, and that it is really shrouded in veiled motives. So I think it's interesting to acknowledge this. I just wanted to lay that out.
Well, thank you, Councilman Dorsey, for your depth of history there. I know we said we'd go back to Mr. Peak. I also see there's a Tavi Hawn and also Sammy DiDonato who wants to speak. So we'll go back to Pika, and then we'll go through the rest of the testimony.
All right, thank you. I want to thank Councilman Henry for his comments, and I want to thank Councilman Dorsey for the history lesson. Unfortunately, that doesn't answer Councilman Henry's question, and quite frankly, it's very irrelevant. The question that Councilman Bullock asked or talked about was, is this a holiday for Italians? And do Italians look up to Columbus as their hero? It is definitely a day in which Italians celebrate their heritage. In Baltimore, there is the longest running consecutive parade in the country, 129 straight years, of which I'm the chair. Back in 1937, whether it was FDR, whether it was President Harrison, they happened to pick Columbus Day. And it was a day that recognized that Italians could be considered white people. We weren't even considered white people. And I sent every council member a copy of a New York Times article. Italians were subjected to severe and abject discrimination. And yes, so to answer your question, it is a day that Italians celebrate their heritage. And I implore the council, I have no problem with Indigenous Peoples Day. Through Councilman Cohen's effort, we've been working with people with Indigenous Strong. We're happy to establish a relationship, and we'll celebrate Indigenous Peoples Day with them. They deserve this day. But contrary to what you think, Chairman Bullock, it is not separate from Italian heritage. I mean, so you're basically imposing your opinion on how Italians feel about the holiday. It is a day that Italians celebrate their heritage. Call it something else. It doesn't matter. Don't take it away. I think it's unfair. I think it's patently unfair if you do that. And I know you've got a lot of people who want to testify, and I'll stop talking. I'm happy to answer any questions that you have. But I implore you to rename it either after another Italian figure or Italian Heritage Day.
Okay, well, there are a couple things I'll just say really quickly. I mean, so one, what it does is, again, we celebrate Indigenous People Day. It doesn't take away the ability to celebrate Italian heritage, whether it be through a parade or any other means. But I do find it interesting that it's only after the introduction of a holiday or a proposal to call it Indigenous Peoples Day is there a consideration to name it something else. So I think that may be something that, is worth having some conversation. I don't want to get too much into a back and forth. I know Councilman Dorsey has a point, but I also want to get through the rest of the testimony, because I know there are a number of people from the public who want to have their voices heard. So Councilman Dorsey, we can go really quickly, and then we'll go back to some of the testimony.
Thank you,
Mr. Chair. Look, I think that Mr. Speaker makes a strong point that if Columbus Day is about Italian-American heritage, it is specifically to celebrate Italian-Americans, like my ancestors, in induction into a system of whiteness. That it's specifically about celebrating the point at which Italians attained the class status of white people as a people advantaged over Black people, over Indigenous people, over other immigrants, over other people. And that's exactly what this holiday represents, is indoctrination and induction into a system of white supremacy.
Thank you, Councilman Dorsey. And I think it's an interesting point as we talk about how different ethnic groups have been referred to in different, well, whiteness, non-whiteness, blackness, what have you. But let's go on testimony. Let's see who else we have who's ready to testify.
Tabby Horn.
Tabby.
Shio, Tavi Dawado, Chichalagi. Hello, my name is Tavi. I'm Cherokee, Eastern Band descendant, and you're on Indigenous land. This is still Piscataway land that was taken away and stolen. And every person on this call today is a guest of the Piscataway here. Baltimore is home to one of the largest urban Indian populations on the East Coast. A lot of Lumbee and Cherokee Indians moved here from North Carolina during the federal government's Indian Relocation Program. We're also home to Halawasaponi, Tuscarora, Shinnecock, Shawnee, Monacan, Choctaw, and thousands of other Indians. Due to historical oppression, our people still struggle. It hurts us to hear about Columbus Day and parades and statues honoring somebody who was responsible for Indigenous genocide, thousands upon thousands of murders. It doesn't help for our children to have to hear this man honored in public school and see parades on his holiday. It feels like people don't care what has happened historically and still happens to Indigenous people now. I'm here with my 3-week-old baby, Waya, Wolf, Adenedi Amashelu, gift of water and corn. And I don't want my child growing up in a place that celebrates somebody who was responsible for their ancestors and our Indigenous relatives' genocide and celebrating a person who trafficked Indigenous children like themselves. I want my child to have a holiday that instead celebrates Indigenous Peoples Day. Changing the name of the day to Indigenous Peoples Day recognizes the harm symbolically that was done by Columbus. We need for this to be recognized because of the false history and lifting up of this harm for generations in this country. Renaming the name to Indigenous Peoples Day is just one first step in healing the trauma done to Indigenous peoples. There's nothing related to Italian Americans that means that Italian Heritage Day needs to be on that specific day. Some of our Native community members also have Italian heritage, and we support celebrating Italian heritage on a different day. If it really has nothing to do with Columbus, there shouldn't be a problem choosing a different significant day for that holiday. Mr. Pica, I don't believe you live in Baltimore City, and I hear you saying that celebrating Columbus Day is celebrating the time when Italians became viewed as white and therefore gained privilege. Meanwhile, Indigenous and Native peoples are still on a day-to-day basis trying to convince people that we still exist. We are still struggling to be counted. We are still struggling for resources, and many of our peoples are struggling just to have clean drinking water. City Council, thank you for honoring the work that's been done for years to sponsor this bill again. We support a bill that changes Columbus Day to Indigenous Peoples Day, and we believe that the time is now to join with other cities, counties, and states who have led the way in doing this. Shki, thank you.
Thank you. And the way people as well. Again, we'll go on to additional testimony.
Sam Helmy. Okay. Sammy DiDonato.
Hello, can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, my name is Sammy DiDonato. I'm here representing the group Baltimore Italians for Indigenous Peoples Day. I want to thank everybody on this call. I want to thank you, Councilman Bullock, for bringing this bill forward. Very excited this is happening. It's been lots of years leading up to this, and a lot of organizing by folks Indigenous Strong and other folks in the community. So really glad this is happening. I'm particularly involved in this because I do really love history. I studied history. I don't think we need to belabor the point anymore on how Columbus was a genocidal, terrible human being. I do want to focus on how it's important that how we remember our history and how that changes. I'm not, how can I say this? As a group, we understand that the older generation of Italian Americans needed to find a hero in Columbus in the beginning of the 1900s when that was offered to them because this country is such a valuable place for immigrants. That's not a reality that anyone on this call is trying to deny. And like Councilman Dorsey was saying, Columbus was a way of punching down. It was a way of punching down to get accepted into whiteness and to be safe through violence onto others. I don't think that we need to punch down to be safe. I think that by changing how we remember our past is a way how we can change our future. And I think that, like Jessica Dickerson mentioned, this is just a small step. It really is just symbolic. I think I would much rather be spending my time talking about things like the previous session. It's about housing and how to actually keep people safe and talking about something symbolic. But I think that it is an important way to really change how we change our history, how we think about our history, how we think about ourselves, and how we change our ability to change the future. I've talked with you, John Peake, about this several times in the past about why it's important that we get rid of Columbus Day, why we don't celebrate Italian Heritage Day on October 12th. I think, like you said, Councilman Bullock, that's just changing the name, but continuing the celebration of Columbus, which is something that we do not want. It's something that no one in our group wants. We're insulted by the thought of any continuation of celebration of Columbus. We don't want that to continue in any kind of way. I think there's many other days in the year that folk could look to have Italian Heritage Day on another day. We could do it on Cabrini's birthday, which is in July. And I would be happy to participate in that kind of conversation going forward. I'm very excited that it sounds like Indigenous Peoples Day is going to happen, and I'm really here to make sure that there's no more celebration of Columbus in Baltimore City. And I do have a couple questions that I was wondering if folks could clarify, which is, I understand that Columbus Day might not get removed for this year. I'm very hopeful that we can have this bill passed in time to make this change for this year. I'm kind of wondering, just want to urge everyone who's listening to make that happen. I think that it's really important. I think people have been waiting for a very long time. And anything we can do to have this change done by October 12th, we should make that happen. As well as removing Columbus from future years, Columbus Day from future years. And yeah, that's about that all that I want to say. Appreciate everyone's time, and yeah, thank you very much.
Well, I'll just say, we appreciate your testimony. I'll take the last part first. So given the timing where we are, if we're able to pass this through committee today, then we stand a chance of passing it as a full council, but we'll see what happens. I'll stay hopeful. The other part that I would say is that I appreciate the fact that we're talking about different communities working together, right? So you mentioned Italian Americans, Indigenous peoples working together. That doesn't have to be an us versus them, but again, looking at history, but also how we celebrate history, how we honor people. I won't rephrase what you've already said because you've done it eloquently, and I know Councilman Dorsey's also made some similar points. So I won't belabor the issue. I do want to again provide for more testimony as we move forward. So let's see who else is here to testify. Okay, it looks like that's all we had. So if there's anyone else who had comments, any members of the committee, it looks like I see one person who might be itching to say something. But if there's anybody who hasn't spoken yet, I see Councilman Henry. Yeah, so go ahead.
I'm seeing on my screen still hands raised for two other people besides Sally Hahn in the attendee list. I can't tell if they're people who have already testified. So if everyone whose hand is still up has already testified.
We're going to try to go through again. So thank you. And so I know Richard's going through to try to see if they're going to respond, but I didn't see that. So thank you. So things I don't see.
Nice one. Kathleen Kellner. No response. Michael Moore. Michael Moore. Nope. Second time, huh? Okay. Sam Helmet. It looks like he hung up. So that's it, Mr. Chair.
All right. So again, thank you. Is there any other members of the committee that have, or any members of the committee have any additional testimony or comments, questions at this point? So I'll go to Henry and then to Dorsey. Yes.
Okay. Well, I'm only kind of keeping track here, but I think he's one round ahead of me. So I'll just quick. I didn't give this thing or anything, but as far as I know, I may be the only member who is both descended from both Italian immigrants and Indigenous peoples, which has given me, I don't know, a certain perspective on this. I agree 100% with my colleague, Brian Dorsey, that the Italian American community is not a monolithic thing and that nobody speaks for all of that community. I would have imagined the same would be true for Indigenous peoples. I think that we have had an extensive selection of people testifying on this, not just today, but the other comment I'll make is this is not the Baltimore City Council's first attempt at renaming Columbus Day as Indigenous Peoples Day. There was another swing at this 4 years ago, which turned out to be unsuccessful, but there was a lot of testifying at that hearing as well. I have some grasp of the passions that have been raised. I appreciate the testimony today, especially from Tavi Hahn, in terms of explaining, I think, laying out for everyone the clear reason why, even if the name is changed to something less offensive than Columbus Day, allowing that day to continue to be celebrated by Italian Americans will still perpetuate the decades and centuries of oppression that we are trying to resolve and erase now. So I say that to say that is really the answer to the question that I asked at the beginning of the hearing. Is there some reason why we can't just name Indigenous Peoples Day on a different day? And that is because part of lifting up the struggle of the Indigenous peoples is to take that day away from the memory of Columbus. So I'll mention this. There's no need for a response, but I'll say this to Senator Pica. That is, I feel like I have gotten the answer to my question. And so what I would encourage to Senator Pica and to anyone else who is unhappy that if Columbus Day goes away, they feel like there is no day left to honor Italian Americans. I say that step, I don't want to call step two because there's been a lot of steps in this, but I think that's the next step. The next step is sit down and figure out is there another person that the Italian American community would like to rally around to honor? Or do we want to not run the risk of investing our passion and our caring in a particular individual when if we've learned anything in the last several years, it's that people who were on pedestals sometimes fall. And it might be better to simply honor Italian American heritage. And if so, what day of the year should we be trying to honor that on, given that this particular Monday in October is going to be off the table? And so that's really just a comment, Mr. Chair. Thank you for letting me have a few minutes.
Thank you, Councilman Henry. And I know Councilman Cohen had some comments, and so wanted to definitely give you an opportunity. So Councilman Z. Cohen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to my colleagues on the committee. Thank you to all the folks who have come and testified on this bill. Mr. Pica had mentioned we've been hosting some conversations among folks in the Italian American community, mostly folks in Little Italy, as well as folks from the Indigenous American community. And what was most striking most recently, we were able to bring people together and just sort of hear from each other and hear some of our shared histories, some of the pain that people have experienced, but also just sort of see each other, albeit in a Zoom setting, which is less pleasant than being in person. But to me, it was really healing. And, I come to this conversation as a Jewish American whose family, part of my family was annihilated in the Holocaust. Part of my family escaped to the United States, also faced anti-Semitism here, but also were able to assimilate into whiteness. And so, I think about sort of my own sort of weird way into this conversation, which is that I think Jews and Italians both have experienced some horrors within this country. But I think in both cases, at least in the United States, it pales in comparison to what was done to Native American folks, Indigenous folks, and certainly Black folks. And that, more recently, socioeconomically, in terms of power and privilege and sort of our place in American life, we're actually doing pretty well. Now, that said, I think for Jews especially, and I imagine for Italian Americans as well, there really always is a lurking threat of the rise of anti-Semitism. We've seen an enormous amount in the past couple of years, certainly in Pittsburgh and other cities throughout this country. And, it is still a real danger and threat lurking underneath the surface. But I think that part of how we heal, part of how we come together and support each other is to acknowledge, honestly, what has been done, is to acknowledge the ways in which we've put folks on pedestals that did not belong there, and to move from there. And so I think this is a healthy conversation. I think it's a healthy bill. I do think it's timely. I look forward to continuing some of the conversations we've been having with both Italian American and Indigenous American folks. But I think that this is an important moment. And while I would most certainly support our Italian American community in wanting to have a day to honor and acknowledge either one of their heroes or Italian American heritage generally, I think that it is now time to move forward without Columbus and to honor Indigenous peoples in Baltimore. So I stand in support and again appreciate your sponsorship, Mr. Chair, of this bill, and also just the thoughtful testimony from everybody, not only here today, but in the past hearings on this topic.
So, Councilman Cohen, I just want to say thank you again for your testimony, your comments. I know you've been convening conversations, but I think also, your voice as one who represents, as far as your district, Little Italy, and a number of Italian residents, I think you have an interesting perspective. Before asking if there's I think there's one more person testify. Thank you for catching that. We'll go right to one more testimony before we go to Councilman Dorsey.
Summer Weiss. Summer Weiss. No answer. Okay.
Something's from my staff.
Okay. She had her hand up. Okay. That's it, Mr. Chair.
All right. So before asking if there's a motion, I will go to our resident expert, Councilman Dorsey. Do you have something else that you wanted to?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to, much in the same vein as what Councilman Cohen expressed. I just want to remind folks. I come from a family. My grandfather was born into a house of immigrants in Hazleton, Pennsylvania. That house was, and really that whole town was a place for Italian immigrants to have a first place to go as they came through Ellis Island. And that my family in the south of Italy still owns and lives in the same house that my great grandfather lived in, and that his father and his father and his father lived in. That I remain part of a family that's very rooted in Italy, and that grew out of the Italian immigrant community. And so I just want when I vote in support of this bill, for it to be real clear where I'm coming from, that's where I come from. And still, when the conversation of Black Lives Matter became a more common kind of dinner table kind of conversation across the United States some years ago, and in a lot of cases, particularly in white households for the first time in history, I come from a family where people, some people at that table would say, "Well, whoa, let's not forget about how oppressed Italians were." And I had to have some real deep conversations about the difference between slavery and genocide and a system that eventually indoctrinated Italians into whiteness, and that what it really means that we have a system of white supremacy. And so I just wanted to be real clear that that's exactly where I'm coming from when I vote in support of this bill. And I just wanted to put on the record that if we wanted to acknowledge August 23rd as some kind of day for Italian folks, I think that Sacco and Vanzetti will be some great people to commemorate. And I just want to be the first to put that on the record here in the committee. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councilman. And again, I think that's a very interesting suggestion. I think one should be considered, but again, we'll leave that to other minds. But at this point, we'll entertain a motion if there is one.
I move the bill favorable.
Dorsey. Moved by Dorsey. Is there a second?
Second by Sneed.
Second by Sneed. All right, so we are ready for a vote.
Chairman Bullock.
Yes.
Chair Bullock votes aye. Vice Chair Schleifer. Okay. We can come back. Member Burnett?
Yes.
Was that an aye, Mr. Burnett? Member Burnett votes aye. Member Cohen? Mr. Cohen?
Yes.
Mr. Cohen votes aye. Mr. Dorsey?
Yes.
Mr. Dorsey votes aye. Mr. Henry?
Yeah.
Mr. Henry votes aye. Member Sneed?
Yes.
Member Sneed votes aye. Try again on the vice chair. Vice Chair Schleifer? Let me see if I can raise him, Mr. Henry. Looks like he's on.
Schleifer?
Mr. Schleifer. Vice Chair Schleifer.
Asking. Schleifer?
Vice Chair Schleifer. Vice Chair Schleifer votes aye. Mr. Chair, it's unanimous. We remind the mayor's office that this bill has to go to the Board of Estimates before second reader, so they need to have all the reports in. But as soon as it comes back from the Board of Estimates, it can go to second reader.
All right. Again, thank you all for your testimony today. Thank you for the members of the committee for your votes and your support. Thank you to our staff who goes through all of our challenges, our technical capabilities, but also thank you to the public who had to voices heard today. We appreciate you, being with us here virtually. And with that, we will stand adjourned and look forward to connecting with you again. So once again, it's House of Urban Affairs Committee. Thank you for your time this evening. Take care.
Okay. Mr. Chair, can we end the meeting?